All right, so going to call to order the meeting today for November 1st, 2022. First order of business, going to take a roll call. So when I call your name, please take your name off mute and take yourself off mute or state your attendance. Chris?
Present.
David?
Present.
All right, Andrew?
Myers?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, make sure.
Marlene?
Present.
All right. Nicholas?
Present.
All right. Brenda?
Present.
All right. Katie? All right. Tim? And Andrew E. All right. Danielle?
Danielle is absent, excused tonight.
Okay. And Brad?
Present.
Great, thank you. All right, so next, just wanted to see if anyone has any questions, comments, or corrections from the minutes from the September 29th meeting. Everyone get a chance to look at the minutes. All right, does anyone have any objection to the approval of minutes from the September 29th meeting? Does not appear so. I hereby approve the minutes from September 29th meeting. Thank you. All right. Just tonight wanted to welcome Hasanthi, the new Department Operations Specialist.
Hi everyone, I'm Hasanthi Piasena. I'm in my third week here with Parks and Community Services, and I'm excited to be here to support the Park Board.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right. So today on the agenda, we'll be sort of going through the community investment strategy and the update and next steps, and also addressing the Heritage Tree Program. I would now like to take any comments from any public comments.
Okay, no spiel?
Okay.
Come on. They often have a lecture before they let us talk.
You're getting off easy.
Look at that. Okay, my name's Connie Marsh, and I applied for some trees for the Heritage Tree Program, which you got today. And so in using that form, it is incredibly outdated. It's also not codified. And so that form is not a thing, it's sort of a form. So when it says only 3 trees, that's not anything that's legal and not anything that has a real basis. So I wonder if that is not something that can be just changed, because all it is a form from 12 years ago. My hope is that we do get a Heritage Tree Program actually codified so that it is in our code and it becomes a thing that has stature and legality. But at this point in time, we have the form that doesn't really serve the purpose of preserving trees that are important in the community. And I use these trees, hopefully all of you know this line of trees that go along Newport Way in front of Tibbetts Valley Park. It's a really signature line of trees. And we have a road widening project that wants to take out those trees. And basically they're thinking they want to put in a planter strip. And I call foul. The width of that road thing is approved in profile, not in reality. So it's a future project. But I'm trying to figure out a way that we can protect these trees that are mainly in a park, because our code right now says that a road widening project can take out the trees, even if they're in your park. So awkward, right, and wrong. And so that is why I went to the substantial effort of doing this heritage tree thing. And this is why I chafe at the concept that a form written many years ago with no legal basis can prevent at least the park board from saying, we want to protect these trees. The other avenues are that you could write a letter to the mayor, which is who you write letters to, and say, these are so important, and this is such an important tree stand that we want to emphasize that the park board wants to protect these trees. So I just want some actions that provides support for the protection of this stand of trees and then other future stands of trees. And we really need to redo the heritage tree program and turn it into a thing. They're both equally good. Good program, protect the darn trees. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie.
My name is Corey Christensen, resident on Squawk Mountain. I have two comments, and one has an A and B. And the first one is about the Eck House. And I'd like to first talk on or speak on behalf of my friend Chuck Olson, who his grandparents were the Ecks. And if he were here, he would be saying, preserve the house. And I frankly would agree with him, because when we look back at Confluence Park, the Eck House was not the only house that was in the park that initially was slated to be preserved. Matter of fact, I'll start out with a little quote. This was from Margaret McLeod, excuse me, our previous park planner. And this was in talking about in the Issaquah Reporter, talking about the consultant, and this was, we had 3 large community meetings there, and this was after one of them. One of the big challenges for the Berger Partnership would be to make good use of the 2 farmhouses, the Eck farmhouse and the Anderson farmhouse, which would be conserved and turned into community facilities for the residents and visitors. Pretty shortly after, a few years after the park was actually up where you could use it, it was determined that the Anderson house, which had been donated by Vern Anderson in the name of his grandfather, needed to either be moved or torn down. And it could have been moved in the park, but it was actually in quite sorry shape inside. And it was determined that to meet the historic preservation part, it would focus on the Eck House, which was still a more classic farmhouse and had coal mining roots and a wash shed and all this sort of thing. And also the property for the Eck House was purchased with councilmanic bonding, which meant people like Chuck and myself and others all campaigned to preserve it, to add it to be part of the third part of the Confluence Park, which is, it's interesting. The confluence was both of Issaquah Creek, but also the Anderson property, the Pritt property, which was in the center, and then the Eck House property. And so I think that Chuck would be right, that we really should be preserving the Eck House and not turning it into a picnic shelter. But I understand we have the problems that we have, but I think it's a tremendous loss. And it is really something that we have to be looking at, how we got to where we are, because we've basically squeezed all of the historical part out. Granted, we're saving a little bit, but we're not saving very much. My part B is that one of my, I can't think of the right word without it sounding too bad, but where I get grumpy is with park master plans. And I think that the being around for the community meetings and the formation of this park master plan, that this should require opening the master plan up, because it's a significant change. Because basically what we've done or are doing is subtracting out historical preservation, saving a little bit. The barn has a few pieces of old barnwood in it, and now the Eck House is going to be a few pieces of old Eck House. And the reason I bring that up is because whenever the community brings up something that's in a master plan, the answer is always, we can't change it because it's a master plan and we can't change a master plan. But when you have instances like this, you guys seem to be able to change a master plan pretty easily. The Confluence Park Bridge is another example of that, because originally that bridge was supposed to touch all three parts of the confluence, but because of the widening of the creek, it made it so it could only go across one, or two, excuse me. Now, that might not seem to be a big deal, except when you start looking further down the road at the future phases of the park. The next phase or major phase is connecting over to where the park maintenance shop is, which is going over the East Fork. So now we're looking at having another bridge. So really that should have triggered looking at the master plan and possibly deciding where that bridge goes, because they're also talking about putting in a bridge at Holly Street. So when it's all done, this park might not really be called Confluence Park, but Three Bridges Park. And so sometimes to take a pause and to look at this stuff makes sense. My other comment is I just wanted to give a shout out to Tim for his comments about Hillside Park at the last meeting. He was absolutely spot on about parking, spot on about the lack of sidewalks, and spot on about, you just go down the list. He has the pulse of the community, and while he was basically the lone eagle on this, he is actually speaking very clearly and loudly about what people are thinking in the community, or in the neighborhood, I should say, and it's much appreciated. I think that one thing that was very disappointing was hearing that not getting emails, because there's a large community group that's participated in the Hillside Park meetings for a long time, and having the list and not using it, it doesn't really count. You got to use the list. Public engagement is important. Keeping people on board is important, especially with a park where the majority of the people don't like what you're doing there. I happen to be in the group that is more ambivalent about the playground, but if you're asking the questions, survey questions in a more granular way, I would probably end up being closer to the 60% of the people that don't like what's happening there. For me, what's most important is seeing that the field drainage gets put in, because I don't want to see that ending up being value engineered out because it's too expensive, it's too difficult, it's too whatever. Because if we don't get the field drainage, then I think you're going to make it so that instead of 60% of the people that are upset, it's going to be 97% of the people. Anyway, thank you. And again, thanks a lot, Tim. That's not
right. Thank you, Corey. All right. Any other public comments? Anyone on?
No one else signed up for public comment, and I don't see anyone else on the online.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we will move forward to the update on the community investment strategy.
Great, thank you, Zach. Good evening, everyone. Jeff Watling, Parks Community Services Director. Apologize for not being able to join you tonight, but for health reasons, makes more sense that I join you here. So greetings all. Welcome, Hasanthi. I'd give a shout out there as well. Third week in, just so excited to have her on board. She comes with a vast array of experience doing administrative special project work in higher education, has a public admin degree, has certainly a zest for local government. So welcome on board, Hasanthi. Monica, a shout out as well. Monica Negrilla, our Human Services Manager, who so aptly helped and supported our park board meetings in these months between Melissa leaving and Hasanthi coming on board. Monica, you're a rock star. Thank you so much for that. All right, so the community investment strategy. Boy, we met on September 29th. Thank you so much for the work of the ad hoc group, as well as your work over the prior months ahead of that. The motion that you approved that night was then forwarded on to City Council. Tonight, the intent tonight is to give you a recap of those conversations with Council we had on October 10th, and then again on October 17th, the action that the Council took, and then sort of laying out some next steps in terms of what's it going to mean for that work. I also want to add into this discussion along the way through the budget process here for 23-24 budget, some operating budget conversations we've had that really will influence some of our park planning capacity as we head into this work and into the future as well. So I know Jen Fink has a slide presentation she's going to share. I don't know, Jen, if you want to transition to that coming up, I'll continue like my really quick overview and then end up turning it over to you for the projects themselves. So again, on October 10th, we had a long discussion, really robust conversation with Council and getting their feedback on your initial recommendations and talk through the projects. Hats off. I know both Katie and Chris Kovac were in attendance that night. Chris Kovac, thank you so much. You did a great job of, I think, really reflecting and representing the discussions that the park board had on the rationale as we went through that matrix, but then also the recommendations themselves. Council so appreciated the work of this park board. Their subsequent deliberations on the 17th led to an outcome that's a little bit different than our recommendations, but very much in line, quite frankly, with the recommendations and discussions that that you had on the 29th. As you'll see from the overview that Jennifer will give. I think I'll pause now to save my voice for later conversations throughout this evening. Let Jen take over this portion and then jump back on with the staffing capacity piece. Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. So as Jeff so aptly prompted, your recommendation on the 29th to Council was to support the $4 million community investment strategy with your preference being the pedestrian park, Depot Park, and the Senior Center Plaza. As we took that recommendation back to Council on October 10th, the conversation at that meeting really wanted us to focus on 3 different areas, and that was the Creek Corridor, with specifically the dog park. There were some conversations around Confluence Park and what could potentially be done there, and Veterans Memorial Consolidated Park, which includes areas of Pedestrian Park, Depot Park, and the Senior Center Plaza. We went back to Council on the 17th, given some of the Council conversations. These are all videoed if you want to go back and watch those conversations, and really took the pieces of each of those areas that Council wanted us to focus on and figured out a strategy how to address those. And so as we went forward in our capital budget, now that the conversation on the 23-24 budget was going forth, we do have funding in there for a dog park. So we are going to proceed with this project, but not with the ARPA funding, but rather through our capital improvement project. So the dog park at the Issaquah Community Center, just down the road here, where the old skate park used to be, will be our first permanent dog park. We'll get that hopefully constructed and built next year. It's not too complex of a project, so we should be able to deliver pretty quickly on that one. Confluence Park, really there was a focus of wanting to, as we heard tonight, save some of the history of the Eck House, but how can that space be more usable community space, and how can we still pay homage to the history of the Eck House, but create a more usable space for gathering, much like the existing picnic shelter out there is. So rather than doing the play area, we're really just going to be focusing on a picnic shelter here with some patio space. that connects to the existing playground, which is this area right where my hand is moving there. So a little smaller scale project on this, but we'll provide some gathering space, also a rentable space for parties. So there is a potential for some revenue generation with this as well. Veterans Memorial Consolidated Park, through conversations, really focusing on the senior center and providing some new activity spaces, not only for seniors, but as an additional park use for the public as well, was really a focus of heightened conversation and interest, as well as pedestrian park. You know, this corner is such a visible corner off of what is surprisingly one of our regional entry points to the city. A lot of traffic comes through here, so both of these areas are going to be focused. We will do some type of connection to connect these, even though this area is grayed out. As we try and further the designs through those, we are going to try and make some connection that leads to those two spaces together. So it's not the ends of the dumbbell, but there's also the bar in between that connects those living spaces. Here's just kind of a close-up again of the pedestrian park. These were all in your prior packets, so you've seen these before. But as we start going through our next stages of design, we'll start refining these designs as well. And then here's just a closer look at the Senior Center Plaza as well. You know, some activity spaces, whether it be bocce or shuffleboard, some outdoor seating, a canopy space perhaps, and some new lighting and a rolled entry curbless here to allow more of a drop-off zone as needed. Some of the preliminary costs, I know initially we were working with a solid 4 million. We had to do some cost sharing and some project cost reduction a little bit. I know we're still in the really fat, wiggly numbers right now because there's a lot we don't know, but a lot we do know. So we're thinking Confluence Park project is going to cost in between 1 to 1.4 million, and we plan on funding that with 800,000 of ARPA money. And there's about 200,000 from an insurance claim. Several years ago, someone set fire over by one of the deck areas of the building and did some damage, and we were able to collect on that. So this would be reusing those insurance funds in a purposeful manner. Veterans Memorial, we're thinking that's going to be in the $3.6 to $4 million range. We are submitting an ask to the state legislature for some additional funding, which then brings the ARPA dollars that we're able to use in the 2.8 to 3.2. So it'll be split just a little bit between Confluence Park and the Eck House, and we anticipate each project being between 1.8 to 2 million. As I mentioned, even though Depot Park isn't in here, we will try and use monies from each to make a connection in that space. So that's kind of where we're sitting at budget-wise right now, going forward. And this was the motion that council authorized, which was to spend 800 in ARPA funds for the Confluence Park and 200,000 of the insurance, and then for pedestrian park, Senior Center Plaza, 3.2 million of the ARPA funding. Now, you've seen this little schedule before, and look here, we're starting to tick off a few items. As Jeff mentioned, council is anticipated to adopt the budget on November 7th. So we will be ready to check one more box off on this as well, but we're going to try and head right into design and creation, further design, and then eventual construction document and more detailed design through this. And we've got a heightened schedule in order for us to be able to get through permitting and also get this bid and awarded and constructed in starting November of next year. So we've started some preliminary conversations already with our design team. We're scoping things out. One of the things we would like to also ask of the board is participation from the ad hoc committee to help further, being this design process is so condensed. Having their input as to how we arrived at these decisions for these projects to begin with. Would really love to further that engagement. If the board should have that, as well as the ad hoc members would be willing to participate. Not nearly the amount of time that was needed before, a little more tolerable, but definitely would be great as a sounding block from them being able to come back and report out to the board as we further these designs, because they're pretty well scoped right now. So as we go into a little further detailed design, starting to really work more with the budget and what we can do and what's achievable. So with that, that's where we are with the ARPA funds and capital projects. Any questions?
Looks like I saw Brad's hand go up,
And Marlene?
and Marlene.
So thanks for that, Jennifer. It all looks good. The freight train certainly is in motion, and so it might be a little bit late to talk about a couple of these things, but I kind of wanted to at least touch base with what Corey had to say. You know, it's been a long, long time since I've seen the master plan for Confluence Park. And it would be good to maybe see what the language was in reference to some of those historical houses to make sure that we're doing the right thing here. I assume that it's probably general enough language that we can do this, you know, and still be in line with the master plan. But I think Corey raises a good point that if we're going to be making altercations to historical landmarks, that we incorporate, you know, those master plan concepts. And I know Jeff will be able to talk more about that. You know, one of the things, you know, in reference to the, you know, frankly, you know, beyond that, I do think that a shelter would probably be a good thing there for the Eck House, because it would probably be very usable, maybe more so than what could be done in renovating the Eck House. You know, one thing, you know, people that know me know that I'm big into images and into interpretive panels, and a suggestion that I would really like to make in reference to both the Anderson and Eck House would be to perhaps incorporate some historical images to mount in those shelters, and also some interpretive panels that would actually be able to provide some good historical background for both of those historical houses. And I think that that would maybe help bridge the gap to some extent in terms of the conversions that have occurred, and would also be very beneficial to the community to have a better awareness of those historical pieces. So I would really like to, you know, see us do something interpretive more. You know, much like, you know, I don't know how many times I've asked for an interpretive follow-up to the, you know, the Confluence Bridge.
It's coming. It's in production.
Well, good.
Really?
Jen.
It's in production, really.
Something that we've talked about in any event. So thanks for that.
Yeah. No, the sign is at the sign shop getting produced, truly.
Thanks, Brad. Marlene?
I was curious a little bit about Depot Park, and it's pretty much, you know, stricken kind of from this. And I'll admit I did not, you know, watch the live council events, but I was just curious what discussions kind of took place with Depot Park, and could you guys just maybe tell us a little bit about how that one kind of got nixed?
Yeah, I can certainly jump into that. You know, I don't know that I would say it got nixed. I think it was, as council saw the entirety of that vision, right? Both pedestrian depot and the senior center. I think their interest, Marlene, in realizing, all right, the money can't do all of it. How do we perhaps, I think they showed interest in investing on the edges being strengthening that presence between Front Street Sunset, so the pedestrian park side being really strengthening that entry point into and towards the depot. But then also they had a lot of interest in how to take the senior center and rather have it really have no real relationship with Memorial Field, Veterans Memorial Field, how to strengthen that relationship. And so I think that led to this idea of, and I think it is, I can't remember who, I forgive, I'm not going to give credit to the right board member. Please raise your hand. But this idea of being an activator, right? Of saying, how does this investment not live by itself, but do we invest on pedestrian and senior center, realizing that we want it to be an accelerator to future investment there at Depot. And so I think that's where this idea of starting with the edges, phase the two edges, let the middle that still has a few more questions answered to it, its relationship to the parking lot, etc. Let the first phases on the edges help strengthen the need and the speed for the investment in the middle.
Brad, I guess your hand go up again.
Yeah, I did. I forgot to make a comment, and Marlene kind of triggered it to some extent. You know, I really like what's come together here with the use of ARPA in many respects. I just would like to make an emphasis that in the design process, and I know this is probably going to happen anyway, but I'd like to fuel the fire here, to really have some sort of a connective trail to some extent between the pedestrian park and the senior center, I think is really crucial. And to, at least in the design aspect of Depot Park, to at least concentrate at least on that connection piece without maybe having to go into the full design work of Depot Park would at least be helpful. I know that's something, I did watch the meeting, and I don't think that kind of came up, to at least be able.
It did come up, absolutely, Brad, and you're right. How to at least have some type of common thread.
Right.
That has it feel like a connected experience. Yep.
Right. Thanks.
Yep. Great question, Marlene. Zach, can I take a second and I guess respond to Brad's comments and also, Corey's comments. I too really appreciate your comments, Corey. Thank you. And would echo those, right? How do we, in making this consideration and figuring out, all right, how does Eck House become a public amenity? How can it become part of the park? It would certainly be our goal and intent that it is a way of really recognizing this as a historical space, but having it be a historical space that has a lot of public use. I want to note something that you said, Brad, and I don't think you meant to say it, but I just want to emphasize this is not a historically registered house. It is not currently on any sort of historic register. So there's none of that we need to work through. That said, though, there is history attached to that. And I think as we really go about placemaking, emphasizing that history, celebrating that history, having interpretive signs on that history, you're absolutely right. Not only for what this house is and its really historic reference to the farmhouse and the farmhouses that were on that site, but then also the Anderson barn and what the other shelter really represents as paying emphasis to the barn. I have had an initial conversation with some members of the Historical Society. They're very interested, very intrigued by the idea. We certainly feel like they're going to be a really important resource as we roll up our sleeves and see how we could make this happen.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other comments?
Happy to continue with ad hoc stuff, Jen, and not sure if there's any formalities there, but just keep me posted.
That sounds great.
That actually kind of segues into the next thing. So just kind of wanted to gauge the interest from the board in continuing with the ad hoc for the next 6 to 8 months. If there's interest from park board members in continuing that separate ad hoc meeting, or if anybody would like to comment to that.
I'm happy to
give some
continue
context to
participating.
that. Oh, just some quick added context to that, Zach. Thanks for posing that question. You know, Jen and I do not have dates or times. I think the frequency of this is probably not to the speed with which we were doing in an 8-week window and trying to get a lot of work done. This is probably feels more like every 6 to 8 week kind of a cadence. Just that context.
Thanks, Jeff. Nicholas?
Yeah, thanks. Again, Brad's saying a lot of awesome things tonight, so thanks for that. I think the word freight train kind of sticks in my mind, and the idea that, you know, speed is going to be of the essence for deliver on these specific projects. So I think ad hoc is appropriate. I just think it might be also appropriate to allow some people to join or remove themselves if they thought they did their part in the first, you know, go around, and maybe they want to free their time up for the latter half. I'm not volunteering, I'm just saying.
Which, yeah, also kind of segues, I did want to sort of get an idea from the members of the ad hoc, the interest in continuing forward. So yes, thank you for that. That's certainly an important component to continuing as well. I know, Chris, you said you had interest in
Happy to continue
forward.
Marlene was the other one. Andrew E. is not here.
Oh, he is.
I think he joined.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, I joined late. I think if anybody is willing to volunteer in my place, that is definitely open, but I'm happy to continue as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew?
Yeah, I'd love to keep on with it.
Okay. And Marlene?
Yep, I'm on board.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So any other comments with regards to the ad hoc?
Just I'll be in touch as we formalize scope with our consultant team and we start getting a game plan going forward. So stay tuned. You'll hear from me soon. A few weeks, probably.
Yeah, and again, thank you, everybody. Certainly more work ahead. Again, a real appreciation from council and the mayor. It's nice to have, right, your motion really help frame up the council conversation and then be able to report back to you on sort of the outcome of that. And in this case, what it means is now, yeah, jumping on the freight train. We'll try and manage the freight train so we're on it and it's not headed towards us necessarily. Some really exciting public investments that we look forward to seeing come to reality. Along those lines, sort of this next phase of the update, you know, as the 23-24 budget deliberations were happening, maybe just a little bit of a backstory. So Civics 101, right? In an elected mayor city council form of government, the mayor is in essence the CEO of the executive branch and the council is the legislative branch. So it is the executive branch that brings forward a proposed budget. The legislative branch, though, is the one who decides and grants the budget. And so as the mayor and departments work with the mayor to form their proposed budget. This year, given it's a 2-year budget, the mayor this past summer reached out to the council and said, "Hey, council, as I, the mayor, am forming the budget, I'd like to know what your goals are. So as I'm forming the budget, I understand what your goals are as well." And so there was a council retreat. I didn't attend. Department heads weren't asked to attend, but certainly watched it, heard it. In that conversation, council were sort of given opportunity to identify what their operating goals are and what their capital goals are. In that conversation, the green necklace, right? And much of what we discussed in the park strategic plan and still this sort of defined yet somewhat undefined set of many projects was clearly identified by council as a priority of theirs. And so in that conversation, now fast forward into the proposed budget, and as we've been deliberating with council, the proposed budget at the boy, it's a blur to me. One of these two October meetings, I think it was the October 10th meeting. I brought forward and shared with council sort of where the green necklace, the multitude of projects in the 23-24 budget where the green necklace is identified and it has proposed funding. In that conversation, though, it was also discussed and recognized as you start looking at the work plan items that are coming forward within this department, funding alone doesn't make things happen. You don't just allocate money, set the money on the table, and it instantly turns into something. There's no pixie dust for that. It takes staff work, it takes resources to turn investment into actual projects. And so those conversations, both on the 10th and 17th, led to really, and I think this slide, thanks Jen for putting it up, really reflects some of these major projects that are on our work plan in 23-24. From completing the Hillside Park project and doing these three, Veterans Memorial, Confluence, and the dog park as part of the community investment strategy. We have a park strategic plan update that we are going to be heading back out into the community that needs to be done by 2024. So we want to be doing engagement next year on that. Some real focus on continuing strategic acquisitions and making some key investments there. You'll hear me talk a little bit later about an urban forest supervisor coming on board and how do we get an urban forest management plan done. As I was just saying earlier, how to start seeing progress on these multitude of projects that really comprise the Green Necklace and the Creek Corridor. Next slide, Jen. What that led to is not only some proposed staffing that was in the mayor's proposed budget, but a proposed staff add that city council added that will be as part of the budget adoption that council will be considering in November. So park operations and park planning and development are two separate functions, two separate divisions of our department. Within the park operations budget, within the 23-24 budget are two new proposed positions. One, as I was just saying earlier, this urban forest supervisor that will really allow us to, I think, put more of a focus on our natural resources and understand the real need to finally do some full urban forest management planning, as well as really sharpen our capacity from a actual maintenance practices within an urban forest. An urban forest meaning not only all of our open space areas, but our street trees and our trees within our active parks all comprise certainly elements of the urban forest. Also, just of note, is a proposed volunteer coordinator position for the first time within our cities. So realizing, I think, some of the momentum that's been created with Green Issaquah, having that internal capacity to coordinate volunteer efforts is really going to help us multiply that work. That right now is proposed as a 0.5, a half-time, 20-hour-a-week full-time position. So we really look forward to having that capacity come on board. Where I was going, though, with my forgive me, somewhat long-winded backstory on Green Necklace, and just again this need that funding alone doesn't make things happen. It's really brought about the council requesting and adding into the 23-24 budget a park planning and development manager position. Currently, we are a city and a department that has one park planner, and Jennifer Fink is amazing. She does great work, but as one park planner, that does not make a park planning team. What with this proposed position, would really be the creation of a park planning and development division, where we would have a manager. A manager would oversee our current park planning position. Also within the budget and part of the community investment strategy goal of this ARPA funding is a limited term, a 2-year additional park planner project manager position. So as we look at budget getting adopted here next week, what it really means for us is 23-24, we now have a capacity, a 3-person team really beginning to take a look at all of this really important critical work and making sure we're doing it well, making sure we're doing it on time. I think making sure we're able to accomplish the community engagement and the public engagement, keeping the public informed on projects and status of projects like we want to and like we need to. And so all of this looks like a lot of work. I guess I wanted to highlight this as, again, a really important part of this conversation with council, but really, really important to know that certainly as some momentum is being created for making really, really important investments into our city park system, making sure we align and resource ourselves staffing wise to get it done. So there's that as an overview as well. Look forward to seeing what gets adopted once council adopts the 23-24 budget.
Thanks, Jeff.
Nicholas has a question, I believe, Zach.
Okay, Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question about any notable reductions in the service levels on the operating side, if there was any, give and take to get some of the odds.
No anticipated operating reductions.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions, David?
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on the volunteer coordinator. So I actually went out with Tyler on the parks department, and I took out a couple of my corporate. It was our month of giving, and so we were allowed to take one day off and basically volunteer anywhere. So I decided to volunteer. Reached out, and he was talking very excited. Not saying that Tyler's the man for the job, but definitely if we can get 2 or 3 volunteering events a week, just clearing blackberry brushes and digging canals if you want, right? And people love doing that, whether it's corporate people, obviously Costco's huge here, even residents that want to contribute, but they don't know how to functionally get together and dig canals for the park, right? So I think that would be a great addition. Again, half time just to see how it goes first is the right idea, and until it becomes full time, if it ever grows to that. But I think that's a great idea, having a volunteer coordinator there. Just a comment.
Appreciate hearing that. Yeah, we're excited as well.
Brad?
Hey, Jeff, could you just comment a little bit about how, and I agree that coordinator position's going to be just terrific. How will that work with the Green Issaquah initiative that's already in place? Will they actually oversee that program, or will they still run separately?
No, they would oversee it. I mean, so Green Issaquah is really, we see embedding it into what we do, right? So that Green Issaquah management plan, that is ours. We're partners with Forterra, but that's ours. This volunteer coordinator, quite frankly, lets us own that work even more. So we'll remain partners with Forterra in their Green Cities program. But in many ways, that Green Issaquah management plan really gives us a roadmap. It lets us know where our forest is most threatened. It's already identified, right? Sort of those strategic areas we really want to focus on. Where do we need the forest stewards, et cetera? This coordinator would oversee the forest steward training and recruitment, as well as the actual volunteer programs themselves. So I think it gives us an internal resource we've never really had to do that. I shouldn't say never really had. Matt Meckler's amazing. Any of you have worked with Matt? Matt, as park operations supervisor, wears a lot of hats and has a lot of other tasks to do. So
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right. Believe next thing moving forward is the Heritage Tree Program review.
yeah, let me take another quick drink of water so I don't have a coughing spell. Forgive me again. Well, Connie, thank you so much for your public comment. I thought you did a great job of introducing this conversation. I'll touch on a few of those points as well as we certainly jump in. As Connie said, she submitted an application earlier this summer. We certainly appreciated that application. That really allowed us to jump into work and getting a tree assessment done. As our program really outlines, nominated trees are brought to you for approval. I will say that this application is not being forwarded as a nomination, and I'll explain why in a second. It's a little bit more than just a technicality, but certainly the application, and Connie and I have had a chance to chat a couple weeks ago about this. And again, I appreciate her comments because they very much align with mine. Though we're not bringing this forward as a nomination, we really think this is an important time to have a conversation about the Heritage Tree Program and also about these specific trees. And so, though you're not seeing this as a nomination, we'd still like to really talk about two key points, and those 2 points being the program itself. And as Connie said so well, as staff, this is a 20-year-old program. The brochure itself, I think, reflects how old this is. It's time. It's time to do a review and an update, look at best practices, see how we can, I think, best, I'd better identify what our goals are for a Heritage Tree Program and establish a program that meets those goals. With an urban forest supervisor coming on board next year, we would really like to and see this adding that review of the Heritage Tree Program into the work plan next year as a big priority. As the park board and as the represented tree board as part of Tree City USA, we very much want you to be part of that review process. So by us adding it to our work plan, I guess the conversation I want to have tonight is you realizing this will be added to the park board work plan next year as well, as if we were to move forward in that direction. The second reason why we think it's so important to have this conversation tonight is those specific trees and the specific situation going on with those trees there at Tibbetts Valley Park. I think, as Connie said so well in her public comment, and quite frankly, I really appreciated how Connie laid out in her narrative with their application. If you had a chance to look at that, really identifying some of the key reasons why these are trees that have sort of play a key role and have multiple benefits for this community. They really provide a civic benefit in I think demonstrating such a great example of a high canopy corridor of trees along a street corridor, as well as their environmental benefits, as long as their climate, as well as their climate benefits. So with that, we thought it's an important discussion to have tonight. When those trees were planted, I don't think improvements to the right-of-way were necessarily thought of or considered. As those trees were planted, I don't think, future consideration for how and what role that park should play in 2022 and 2025 as the neighborhood to the north may dramatically change in the next 10 or 15 years. So, those are key pressures and factors that we're going to need to keep in mind as we're moving forward on. Forgive me as I'm drifting a little bit. I need to go back and explain why this isn't necessarily moving forward as a nomination. One of the key points in the Heritage Tree program as it's identified now, and I think a really important role is, does the owner of the property agree in nominating this as a heritage tree? In this case, and in fact, I'll ask Jen Fink to pull up the tree assessment and the maps, because I think they do a really good job as we identified all 99 of these trees. These trees really were put pretty much right directly on the property line. So they're really within city proper or city park property as well as city right of way. And so in that sort of dueling domain, it really, I think, represents sort of this tug and pull that impacts these trees. So the reason this is not moving forward as a nomination is the city's not ready to say and sign off and say, yeah, we absolutely think that these are ready to be all 99 are ready to be identified as heritage trees. Again, as the application is written, multiple trees can be nominated, but as the program is identified, only 3 trees could be recognized as heritage trees per year. Given the value that these 99 trees really, I think, bring significance to the community in their entirety, and to try and identify only 3 of them as the 3 that would be deemed heritage trees, I don't think is consistent with the goal or the intent of Connie, or rather us as the Parks Department, and why we think these trees are so significant or important. So again, it's not a technicality. I think what we want to express is I think the need to discuss these trees here at Tibbetts is important. The Heritage Tree program in its current iteration is likely not the vehicle itself that spurs the needed conversation we need to have about these 99 trees. And so we would love to proceed, as I said, next year with an update, a review and update of the Heritage Tree program to really make sure it's representing best practices. Let's look at what other city heritage tree programs do and look like. Let's really identify what our goals are, whether it's codified, at least certainly look at having city council adopt what a heritage tree program is, whereas I don't know that this was even done previously. So many things for us to look at and review in the heritage tree program itself. Maybe a little bit more as thanks for sharing the screen, Jen. A few highlights, I guess I'll give to the tree assessment itself if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it. And then I'd love to open it up for questions, discussion you all might want to have. So this tree assessment did an identification, an initial assessment of 99 trees. So these 99 trees really make up the front of most of the frontage of the park along Newport. And then if you can go back to the prior, Jen, sorry. And then as those trees and the park itself circles 12th, and then some of these same London plane trees are in the parking lot there at Tibbetts Valley Park. So this assessment took a look at all 99 of them in their entirety. They were planted in the mid-'80s. They're all in relatively decent health. There's 29 of the 99 though that have about 10 years ago were cabled because of some stress that they were having. So they're already, like I said, 29 of them that are cabled to support them, to support their higher branches. That doesn't mean they're unhealthy. Cabling doesn't mean they're in decline by any means, but it just certainly means that they're at a point, at a size, at a scale that they need that further support. In the recommendation, there's an additional tree that is recommended for cabling. The assessment certainly recommends, now that those cables have been there 10 years, to do a review of the cabling to make sure they're still doing what they need to do. The nice thing about this assessment is we will be certainly moving forward with all of those recommendations within the assessment. Forgive me, I'm losing my voice here. As I said earlier, and as the survey shows, you know, the trees were really planted in a mix of in the park and on the right of way, and in some cases smack dab right on the property line itself. You know, we do have the future right of way improvements are going to need to be a consideration. That's not to say that these trees need to go away. I would hope these trees need to go away. I would certainly, again, open up to conversation with or without a heritage designation at this point. I think ensuring that any planning, any consideration, any design thoughts for the right-of-way as well as the park itself recognize that these trees and what they represent certainly deserve a significant discussion and a significant consideration for how a portion or all of those trees could be preserved. But at this point in time, it's really, really early to try and say that absolutely can happen. There's a lot that still needs to be figured out. So I think I've said enough. Any thoughts, comments about the Heritage Tree Program itself or these specific trees at Tibbetts? And again, thank you, Connie, for your application and the discussions you and I have had throughout this. And just, again, I think the opportunity to bring this forward as a public discussion.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I think I've got David and then Brad.
Yeah, so I think, again, just reiterating that there's kind of two different discussions here. One is around the Heritage Tree Program, and one is around the application that Connie put forward. So my thoughts on the Heritage Tree Program, I'm just reading through, if this is the whole explanation of what the program is, it seems like it's more ceremonial rather than a preservation or anything. Like there's nothing in the actual program notes that says, even after you get a certificate, you can't cut down the tree. You can still cut down the tree. So it's not about preserving anything. So I fully believe, yes, we should look at this, rewrite it. The whole 3-tree thing doesn't really make sense. And kind of focus, is it going to continue to be ceremonial, or is it going to be codified into law or something that will have a stick, you know, that somebody can't touch something. That's one discussion point. So I think if we could just get, if other cities have something similar to this and we can explore it, maybe pass it around the group, that would be great. In terms of the application process for those specific L-shaped trees, this is a super dumb question, but couldn't we just dig up the trees and push them back 10 feet? Or that's just not cost effective?
There's at least along Newport, one, they're too big. They've gotten to a size that are too big. Also, there's a bunch of utilities, including a major
behind the
trunk line that runs right under there as well. You can go out there and see where. So that also poses potential issues, as well as other utilities within there. So utilities were not highly considered when they're planted. And, you know, trees are all cute when they're little, and we forget sometimes how they grow up and the root systems they need and the space they need and the type of tree. You know, it's really important to get the right tree in the right place as well. So.
Right. And so, Connie, you're only referring to the L shape, not necessarily the ones in the parking lot or anything like that, right? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, the ones in the parking lot are park trees and would be a park decision.
Okay.
The ones that are being threatened are the ones that are along Newport Way that would be considered part of a road expansion project.
Okay. How much expansion is it into the sidewalk?
I don't have the full profile. We'd have to look at Public Works as to what they have through there. But the Mountains of Sound Trail, a shared use trail, is supposed to be going on the northern side of Newport Way there, along what's going to be future transit-oriented development, all the way connecting on the other side of Newport, SR 900, and the other Newport at Maple down there.
I think too, it's too early to tell, but Jennifer, have we heard something from Public Works that they're going to need additional right of way from the park? Are they seeking additional?
I don't believe so. I've not heard, but I don't believe so.
Okay.
Okay, but I do have to think a little bit more.
Yeah, there's some varying distances throughout that section from SR 900 to Maple. Along Newport, there's some varying lines, so they may need right of way in areas. I've not heard about this location specifically.
Okay.
So it's more
But we'd have to-
preemptive, like, we know there's a project happening and it might impact it, but not for sure yet.
Not for sure yet, because we don't have final design for this section, correct?
Brad?
Thanks. I am really excited, frankly, to hear about revamping of the Heritage Tree Program. It's been kind of floundering over the last number of years, and with us being a tree city and with the community so focused on our trees, I think it's great to come up with a little better of a system. Perfect timing as well to looping it in with the forest management plan, bringing on a forest management supervisor. So I think that it's great to devote some time and effort to that next year, and hopefully we develop a park board committee, and I'll raise my hand for that one because I'm all about trees. One of my concerns about the trees along Newport, first of all, I would love to keep them if possible, but when I start seeing what development could do along that arterial there, I would really have concerns in terms of the survivability of those trees and the potential disruption of the root system. I don't know whether or not an arborist has looked at any of that yet or not, but I would start there, because if an arborist comes in and says, boy, whatever you guys plan to do with this road and right of way and all of that, these trees are never going to survive. And that could cut the discussion over pretty quickly if an arborist would not support it. And so I doubt that has happened yet, but I would focus some attention on that first. To see whether or not they're even survivable through the amount of construction that would be needed. But so is that it? We didn't have any other recommendations for heritage trees, but this, I guess, huh?
Nope.
Okay. Well, next year we'll get some good ones. Be my guess. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. Chris?
Yeah, I'm wondering if staff knows the status of development plans, applications, development agreement, anything on the properties on the north side of the road there?
Not heard of anything here, but this is the future transit-oriented development site. I know there's been conversations. I'm not up to date as to where those conversations are, but I do know also Kitty Corner. If you get over the city's development, there is a new apartment building going in on that side that's quite sizable.
Where the Phillips Healthcare is?
Huh?
Where the Phillips Healthcare is, that corner?
Yeah, it's just the opposite corner here, the Kitty Corner.
Kitty corner on that intersection.
Are staff typically given the opportunity to comment and provide input on a development agreement?
On development agreement, but that one is not a development agreement.
The two north?
Or the transit oriented?
Yeah.
Yes, that's had some other conversations outside of parks. I know the trail conversation got added into that, because I know there's supposed to be an outdoor plaza space out there. But that's about as far as the conversation we've had. But they do know the Mountains of Sound Trail, shared use trail is to go along that side of the corridor.
Seems like a conflict if we have a Mountains of Sound Trail creating an incentive to get rid of trees. Needs to be resolved.
Yeah, I don't know programmatically, Chris, if the interest in a trail is what is driving the potential of those trees. I don't think it's that.
No.
I don't think it's a singular programmatic element.
Correct.
But it would be the additional width onto a standard right-of-way road section.
Yeah,
But
and again, I don't know that. I don't know, and that sort of was my question to Jen. I think there's more to still be identified in working with Public Works to say, what are you needing? So sorry, I'm putting my Parks Director hat on. So you're going to hear me having a phone conversation as if you're Public Works. Are you needing additional right-of-way prism, or are you programming within your current right-of-way? As an adjacent property owner, help me understand what that is. If you're wanting if you're needing more of my land, I'm saying my, like that's not mine, but I'm representing the community, then we need to have a conversation about that really early on in your design. So are you designing within your existing right of way, or are you needing additional space? That's an important step that I don't know that I don't have the answer to. I don't know because that request hasn't been made of us. But that's an important distinction that I want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe Chris has a follow-up.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up is because, 20 years ago, pressure on trees was development.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change is real now. I feel some urgency or concern because we've had 2 hemlocks that are beautiful trees that have died. And then according to the arborist, it's because of that. And now there's an article in the paper about the Western red cedars are dying, in large numbers. And those are emblematic of this, the whole Pacific Northwest. So it seems like we have double the urgency that we really need to get this in place to protect not just 3 trees at a time, but to fully protect them and to be able to, apply it to something like this where there's 100 trees.
Mm-hmm.
How much input will, in terms of like the revamping of the Heritage Tree Program, will be coming from like the Environmental Board or the Parks Board? Like Brad was mentioning the possible committee with regards to that discussion. Is there an opportunity for input from Environmental Board, Parks Board with regards to
Absolutely. Yeah, I've not mapped out the work plan. But yes, as I was saying in my quick introduction, maybe not so quick introduction, as a tree board, the park board serves as the tree board with our Tree City USA designation. Yeah, I think natural that you will have input in that review process. I love the idea of perhaps having a smaller ad hoc group that's part of it. Knowing the city now has an environmental board, I think taking this review and update and conversation to some other boards and letting them have voice and feedback could have some real value as well. But yeah, Zach, I've not mapped out what that looks like just yet. But I'm certainly hearing, I think there's some support that the time has come to make this a work plan item, especially with our additional resources when it comes to actual urban forest staffing and urban forest management.
See, Nicholas has his hand up too.
I think this is a really important conversation around preservation of trees. So apart from the thought of updating the heritage program I think there is a conversation on codifying or anything particular on preservation of trees. So apart from the updating of the heritage tree program, has there been any discussions from the council or from mayor on updating the actual municipal code around tree preservation and expanding classification of trees that can be preserved within the city as we kind of approach this more aggressive urban planning green necklace program for the city?
Yeah, great question, Andrew. Yes. So as the Community Planning and Development Department, so other than I have been leading the Title 18, which is the development code section of the city code, that's going through a full update. Park board members who were here early last spring might remember they came and presented, and one of the key elements of that is trees and tree code being updated. So yeah, it's not just a heritage tree program, but really looking at what tree preservation standards and requirements are being reviewed as part of that development code review. I'll mention a little bit later in director's report, but I might as well mention now. So Title 18, I heard from Community Planning and Development, they are within the next couple of months going to have the draft code. It might be falling under sort of the holiday season, so I'll know a little bit more at our November 28th meeting when that draft code is going to be out, but want to make sure whether it's an email communication from community development or a presentation, but making sure that draft gets presented and shared with all of you in a timely manner that thoughts and feedback can be put together and sent back to them. So as that date becomes a little bit more known, hopefully between now and November 28th, we'll make sure that there's a game plan in place so that that development code, that full Title 18 new draft code is something you're able to get some feedback on, especially in tree code and some of the other key elements that really apply to our parks and open space system.
I see Nicholas.
Nicholas?
Okay, thank you. So regarding trees, when they're around you a lot, they feel like your neighbors. And so you hate to see them mistreated, right? Because we all love our neighbors. On my side of the mountain over here, which is like Wildwood and Forest Drive, we've actually had 2 trees that I thought were pretty sizable, and mine felt like heritage trees that were taken down on private property, but right on the right of way, kind of like, Jeff's example of him being the owner, et cetera. And in both cases, I checked with the city to see if the permits were processed. They were. And in both cases, those trees have been turned into beautiful sculptures, woodcraft sculptures. And I just encourage anybody that has some time, if they're driving or walking up Wildwood, you'll notice it right away after you get past Sunrise Place. If you're coming up from the lower part of Wildwood there on the left, there's this amazing, I want to say it was like a native carving, but it looks almost like a totem on the left. And then if you turn up Forest Drive, there's another one at the top of that hill before it reconnects to Wildwood. And it's just kind of a unique way to celebrate the tree's life when it sometimes gets old enough to be topped, so to speak. So I just, since everybody walks around in the neighborhood, in case you're passing by, trees are beautiful even after their tops are gone sometimes.
Their carbon sequestration ability is greatly deteriorated, though. to zero. Yeah, but
they don't absorb as much water either.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to. Yeah, you're right.
But to that point, I mean, so the trees have life cycles. I didn't hear exactly the name. You stated the type of tree that was, and so there is a certain life expectancy for those types of trees.
London Plane is their name. In sort of native, non-stressed, probably non-right of way, they could live hundreds of years. Right. I think it's the specific life cycle of these trees when put next to a road with utilities all around its feet. you know, I would say they're probably not at 40, 50 years old. They're not at the absolute end of their life. They certainly have more life in them. But it's always important to remember when whatever kind of tree you put in a street tree situation, they're not going to live as long as they live in more of a natural open space setting. They're immensely stressed. They live a very stressed life, or a more stressed life.
And two, just want to add on the, reading the arborist report, the trees are suffering too from anthracnose, which is a bacteria in the soil and stuff. I mean, it can be treated, but it's just one of those yet another complicating factor when looking at trees as a whole. And why, and why introducing, because these are all the same type of tree, where having a variety of trees sometimes can help when there is pest or disease that affects specific trees.
Right. Any other comments, questions? All right.
I just thank you so much for this discussion. Again, thank you, Connie, for the application and for our conversations. I think just hearing this feedback, absolutely, we will put onto the work plan next year, this Heritage Tree Program review and update. Really look forward to that process. And then I think our commitment as we continue to advocate for those trees in our conversations with Public Works, as we learn a little bit more about what their needs are for that right of way, we will make sure you all stay informed, even as we're updating the Heritage Tree Program.
Great, thank you. So I guess moving on to the reports. I'll start off with my chair report. So a couple things I found interesting. The TMT south of the Tiger 2 and 3 saddle is complete. So now the TMT south from the Tiger Mountain Road is completed. So I believe that's maybe around about an 8-mile segment of it. And they have a temporary trail currently coming down of West Tiger 2, but they'll be working on that northeast corridor this winter, so plenty of volunteer opportunities with WTA, I believe, with that. Also, the DNR is going to be saving a 10,000 acre carbon reserve, so the carbon credits to offset the potential losses from not logging the area. So basically that 10 acres will be taken out of rotation. Many of those acres are in the Izzy Alps. I believe they're specifically looking at Soderman Slope and Tiger Mountain. And then on November 20th, there will be a Squawk trail scouting for the property that was acquired there in northeast Squawk. So that's exciting. There's, I believe, an opportunity to sign up for that online. I think it's a couple of hours Sunday morning. Also noticed on the city website, there's a climate vulnerability survey. Recommend taking that. I did the survey this morning, was pretty quick. And it looks like Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park is seeking board members for 2023. So if you know anyone interested, I believe they're seeking new board members. So that's all I've got from my end. And I don't believe we have the youth representative yet.
Yeah, but I will. How about my first director's report will be youth board rep updates. So heard from Kathy Jones, the youth board. They apologize. They're meeting tonight, but there are 3 youth board members very interested and have signed up to sort of play a shared role as youth board reps. So all 3 sound very excited to come to our meeting on the November 28th. So look forward to having introductions there and continuing that good representation from the youth board. As far as other updates I have, again, I mentioned, next Monday night, November 7th, regular council meeting, their consideration of adoption of the 23-24 budget will set into motion a lot for us. over these next couple of months as we start to gear up towards 2023. I'll certainly keep you all informed as to what happens following that. A couple other November events I want to highlight on our recreation side. This Friday, November 4th, the community center, Issaquah Community Center will be hosting a really fun cultural event, a Day of the Dead event from 5:30 to 8:30. Monica and the Human Services team have been working with a number of Latino clubs and a number of other community groups to pull this event together. Again, 5:30 to 8:30 at the community center. Please stop on by, or anyone who might be listening to this might be interested. It's really a great cultural event. And then mark your calendars for Saturday, November 19th, for a new community event we're calling Light Up the Night. It will be a tree lighting event. So you might recall through COVID, these last number of years, how we as a city look at holiday lighting and do holiday lighting throughout Old Town has changed and evolved a little bit. We, through COVID though, did not host sort of a tree lighting event. So November 19th will be our first event where we'll actually do a tree lighting and invite the community to come down as we light the big tree on Front Street. We'll be partnering with the Cougar Mountain Zoo. The reindeers will be there. Village Theater's interested in partnering with us in a number of ways. Lighting will include not only up and down Front Street, but I'm excited to say some areas of the Rainier Trail are going to have some really festive holiday lighting. The event will probably include not only the tree lighting itself, but inviting any interested to take a short walk down the Rainier Trail. The new catenary lighting in what's called Festival Street, halfway down Front Street, will then have a small gathering, hot cocoa, some snacks for community to enjoy. Issaquah singers will be there to lead some caroling and other holiday singing. So look forward to inaugurating a new event in Issaquah to coincide with that holiday lighting. Our next meeting will be November 28th. Given our fourth Monday usually falls smack dab in the holidays of December, that will likely, and right now that's planned to be our last board meeting, park board meeting of the year. Certainly that could change if we want to have a special meeting. Right now, we're scheduled to have a quarter of the report, as we've done a couple of other times before, in terms of programs and activities from our recreation programs. Look forward to sharing those. I'll be able to give an update more on the adopted budget and sort of beginning discussions on specifics of work plan moving into 2023. I mentioned earlier Title 18. I'm having a sense, at least be able to give a status report on where that draft is at and what that's going to look like in December and January, and opportunities for you to have a touch in that process. And then as well, I think I mentioned earlier in the meeting, clerk's office will be joining us. Tisha from our city clerk, Tisha, will join us to talk about a virtual attendance policy that they've been working on for all boards and commissions, and what that might mean for us. So thank you all for just the discussion tonight. Look forward to seeing you all on the 28th. That's it for me, Zach.
Great. I'll see you all on my 33rd birthday. So
celebration. There we go.
All right. So that will end the meeting for this month. See you all on the 28th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.